Tonight on Fallon, chaos erupts. What started as casual late-night banter spiraled into a verbal cage match between Bill Burr and Jimmy Fallon. Insults fly. Allegiances are shattered. Tesla, Trump, and a furious walk-off. This was not your average interview. It began like any other episode. Light banter, studio laughter, a jazzy intro. Jimmy Fallon, ever smiling, leaned across his desk with that signature goofy energy as Bill Burr settled into the guest chair with a reluctant smirk. The crowd roared. Bill gave a brief wave, but his eyes were already rolling. You could feel it. There was something electric in the air. The tension wasn't obvious yet, but it lingered just beneath the surface, like storm clouds behind a sunny sky. The opening few minutes were routine. They joked about Boston traffic, the weird smell of New York in spring, and Burr's recent stand-up tour. Then Jimmy pivoted, as he often does, to tech. He brought up Elon Musk's latest AI stunt, chuckling as he mentioned a new humanoid robot that might finally learn to host a talk show. It was meant to be a throwaway line, just filler. But Burr's jaw tightened. He didn't laugh. Instead, Bill leaned in, hands clasped, and launched into a blistering takedown that caught everyone off guard. The tone shifted immediately. Burr wasn't joking anymore. His voice was dry, venomous, surgical. He started tearing into Musk with brutal precision, calling him a nerd emperor who got lucky once with a car that barely worked and now acts like he invented the universe. The studio got quiet. Not awkward silent, but the kind of breathless hush that meant people knew they were witnessing something that wasn't supposed to happen. Burr's rant scorched the studio. He mocked Musk's voice, his obsession with Mars, and his smug Twitter presence. Then, with a venom-laced sneer, he turned the flame up, claiming Tesla should go bankrupt, that it was a Silicon Valley scam wrapped in eco-buzzwords, propped up by PR stunts and gullible cult followers. Every line was sharper than the last. He called Musk a corporate cosplay billionaire who just wants to play president by buddying up to whoever's in office, mentioning pointedly his recent photo, up with Donald Trump. Fallon blinked fast, like he was recalibrating. Then, smiling a little too hard, he defended Musk, claimed the man was a visionary, and that Burr was just bitter because no one ever asked him to invent anything. The audience laughed, but not all of it was genuine. Burr's face didn't move. The air had shifted completely. That's when Jimmy, still grinning but visibly tense, decided to push the envelope. Maybe it was an attempt to reclaim the moment. Maybe it was just desperation. He looked Burr straight in the eye and casually accused him of flip-flopping politically for clout. That's when things truly detonated. Jimmy claimed Burr was a firebrand when it's trendy, that he talked tough on stage but privately courted MAGA donors for his podcast. He even suggested, wildly, that Burr had once pitched a reality show to Fox News during the Trump administration, hoping to cash in on the conservative wave. The studio gasped. No laughter, no applause, just collective disbelief. Bill's reaction was instant and volcanic. His face went red, eyes narrowed like a bull just before the charge. He leaned forward, voice low but vibrating with rage, tearing Jimmy apart in return. He called him a talk show puppet, a phony who giggles through interviews no matter how fake or corrupt the guest is. He accused Jimmy of being a spineless brand mascot, not a real host. Said he'd seen more integrity in a late-night infomercial. Jimmy tried to laugh it off again, but it was hollow. Burr was standing now, hands moving, ranting, fuming. The audience didn't know whether to cheer or hide. The crew looked frozen. And yet, it was compelling. Like watching a slow-motion car crash you can't look away from. Jimmy tried to interrupt, to defend himself, but Burr wouldn't let him. He started digging deeper, mentioning Fallon's infamous ruffling of Trump's hair years ago. Claimed that ever since then, Fallon had been trying to scrub the stain by cozying up to progressives, pretending to be neutral while playing it safe with everyone. The Switzerland of late night, Burr sneered. The tension in the room was unbearable. The lines were drawn. Burr's voice cut through the air like a chainsaw. Fallon's face was pale now, blinking faster, nervously sipping water like it might wash away the heat. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because just as the producers signaled to go to commercial, Fallon, perhaps panicking, perhaps trying to land the last word, made one final jab. He implied, with a snide chuckle, that Burr's whole anti-establishment image was a lie, referencing a private charity dinner Burr had attended with hedge fund billionaires just 2 weeks prior. He smirked as he mentioned the exclusive guest list, claimed Burr gave a speech, raised a toast. The camera didn't cut, the music didn't play. Everyone just watched as Bill froze, then turned. There was a silence so loud it hummed, and Burr, in that moment, looked like a man preparing for war. He stepped toward Jimmy, not physically threatening, but with words that could eviscerate. And then he began to speak again. Bill Burr's voice dropped into a venom-laced calm, the kind that made you lean in even as you recoiled. The crowd, the cameras, the band, everything faded. All that existed in the room was Fallon's forced grin beginning to crack, and Burr's sharpened fury finally unsheathed. He didn't deny the dinner, didn't fumble, didn't dodge. Instead, he dismantled Jimmy's entire premise. He explained, calmly, like a man about to bury someone with facts, that yes, he'd attended a fundraiser, but it wasn't some secret cabal of billionaires plotting stock buys over foie gras. It was a memorial benefit for a friend's child, who had died of cancer. Burr paused after that, letting the weight of it hit. The air sucked out of the room. Fallon blinked. Silence. And then Burr turned the knife. He accused Fallon of knowing that fact, said the show's researchers had prepped Jimmy with all the info, that the dig wasn't accidental, it was deliberate, an attempt to humiliate Burr, on air by spinning a tragedy into scandal. His voice rose. His eyes bore down on Fallon like a hammer ready to drop. The crowd was locked in, a sea of frozen faces as Burr exposed not just a misstep, but a betrayal. Then came the real strike. Bill launched into a full-blown character assassination, not of Elon Musk now, but of Fallon himself. He called out, the fake laugh, the endless ass-kissing of celebrities, no matter how controversial. He mocked the way Fallon clutches his desk like it's a lifeline when interviews go sideways. He brought up the moments Jimmy was silent when it mattered. During George Floyd, during One Me Too, during every political upheaval where other hosts took risks. You're not Switzerland, Burr said, his voice jagged. You're a hologram with cue cards. The band didn't dare play. Fallon tried to interject, but his words stumbled over the tension. The audience murmured, uncomfortable. Some laughed nervously. Others looked around like they weren't sure if they were still part of a comedy show, or if they'd wandered into a public execution. And still, Burr didn't stop. He pivoted back to Elon, tying the threads together in a scathing tirade. Said Fallon was exactly the kind of cheerleader Musk needed. Someone with reach, influence, and absolutely no spine. Someone who would sit there smiling while the billionaire destroyed unions, played dictator on social media, and pretended to be some cyberpunk savior while actual engineers carried his entire empire on their backs. He called Tesla a pyramid scheme with a lithium addiction. Said SpaceX was just a rich man's fireworks. Every word struck like shrapnel. Then, in an astonishing moment of clarity, Burr pulled back the curtain on late-night television itself. He said the real problem wasn't just Fallon, it was the system. The booking agents who sanitize guests. The producers who kill segments that get too real. The networks that live in fear of advertisers. He looked around, addressing the room. Now. Said the whole thing was a high-gloss puppet show, pretending to speak truth while desperately clinging to brand deals and YouTube views. Jimmy's jaw was tight, his fists clenched just out of frame beneath the desk. His grin was gone now, replaced by a stony, wounded confusion. But the worst part wasn't the attack. It was that Burr wasn't shouting anymore. He was composed, cold, devastating. The audience didn't know what to do. There was no punchline to save them, no cut to commercial, no cue for applause. So Fallon tried again, tried to retake control. He changed the subject mid-sentence, as if he could pretend none of it happened. He fumbled out a joke, something weak and hollow about AI robots not being able to handle this kind of guest, a desperate bid to lighten the mood. A lifeline. Burr didn't bite. Instead, he pointed at Jimmy, slow, deliberate. Called out the cowardice of trying to bail when the heat turned up. Said Fallon's whole career was built on that tactic, surf the wave, never make one. He reminded him of the time he tearfully apologized on air for a long-forgotten sketch. Not because he meant it, but because Twitter told him to. The crowd let out an audible gasp. Fallon flushed. For a second he looked like he might say something. Stand up, maybe. Throw it back. But he didn't. He just sat there, motionless, as if a single wrong move might break the illusion completely. Then, Burr turned to the audience. He told them they were part of the show too, that the laughter signs, the reaction shots, the carefully timed edits were all part of the illusion. That this wasn't live truth. It was a broadcasted bedtime story, a distraction from reality, sold in sound bites and candy-colored lighting. He wasn't angry anymore. He was disgusted. Jimmy's face had hardened into something unreadable. The band sat still, not even pretending to play the outro. Somewhere off stage, a producer whispered frantically into a headset. It was chaos hidden beneath a forced calm, like a sinking ship where no one wanted to admit the water was already at their knees. And then Burr stepped back from the desk. For a moment it looked like he might simply walk out. But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he glanced at the camera, straight into the lens. And he said something that no guest in Fallon's long tenure had ever dared say. He told the viewers at home to wake up. He told them that if they wanted to know what's actually going on in the world, maybe stop getting their opinions from millionaires laughing at each other in Midtown. Maybe stop thinking the guy who lip-syncs pop songs is some kind of moral compass. The audience gasped again. And Fallon, visibly shaken, muttered something under his breath. A defense? A rebuttal? It didn't matter, because Burr didn't hear it. Or if he did, he ignored it. He turned toward the exit. Every camera followed him. Fallon didn't stand, didn't call after him, just sat there still blinking, still stunned, as Burr walked past the camera, past the stage, past the illusion. But just before disappearing behind the curtain, Bill paused. He looked back. Just once, and with a quiet smirk, almost pitying, he muttered something off mic. The camera couldn't catch the words. But Fallon's face said everything. The guest was gone. The crowd was silent. And the host sat alone, surrounded by applause signs no one dared to turn on. But what happens next is something no one saw coming. The studio was suspended in an eerie stillness. Burr had left. Fallon sat frozen. The only sounds were distant murmurs from confused crew members and the soft hum of stage lights overhead. The audience, unsure whether they had just witnessed the implosion of a talk show or the beginning of its rebirth, remained in their seats, silent, unmoving. And then the applause sign lit up. For a split second, no one responded. It blinked like a desperate heartbeat, but the audience didn't clap. Couldn't. They had seen something raw, unscripted, real. It didn't fit into the tidy rhythm of laughs and applause. So they sat there, stunned, while Fallon tried to collect himself. His hand resting on the desk trembled slightly as he reached for his mug. Water. lip twitching. Another sip. He tried to smile but couldn't quite reassemble it. Then he did something unexpected. Something Jimmy Fallon had never done before on his show. He turned to the camera and told the crew to keep rolling. The producers panicked. Voices crackled in earpieces. The floor director stood frozen, headset cocked sideways. But Fallon insisted. No commercial, no wrap-up, no escape hatch. Just him, on camera, in real time. He exhaled, long and slow, and began to speak, not in his usual, affable, rapid-fire rhythm, but slowly, deliberately, as though trying to remember how to talk without a teleprompter. Fallon admitted, on air, that the show was broken. That late night, once the pulpit for rebellion and satire, had become a parade of carefully curated nothing. He acknowledged the safety, the polish, the way every segment was designed to please as many advertisers as possible and offend absolutely no one. He even acknowledged Burr's rant, not agreeing with all of it, but conceding the core truth buried in the rage. He admitted he'd become afraid of the very thing that made talk shows matter in the first place. Confrontation, real stakes, unfiltered conversation, and, somewhere along the way, in his pursuit of being loved by everyone, he'd stopped challenging anyone. The crowd didn't know how to react. This wasn't a gag. There was no punchline. Fallon's voice cracked as he spoke about the pressure to smile, to be agreeable, to stay silent when speaking out might cost viewership or invite backlash. He confessed the truth behind that charity dinner jab. He had known it was for a grieving family. But the line had tested well with the team during rehearsal. It got a laugh in the mock segment. He'd gone with it. He hung his head for a moment. No tears. Just tired honesty. Then, slowly, the audience began to applaud. Not all at once. A few hesitant claps. Then more. And then the whole room. Not the thunderous, pre-programmed applause of a successful sketch, but something heavier. Real. Uneasy. Earned. It filled the studio like a release valve opening for the first time in years. And then Fallon did the unthinkable. He walked out from behind his desk and took a seat where Burr had been. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. No cue cards. No scripts. Just Jimmy. Sitting in the chair normally reserved for guests. The other seat. The one where you didn't control the conversation. Where you had to answer, not ask. And he stared into the camera and said he was done pretending. Wasn't quitting. He wasn't walking off. But he was done with the mask. Done playing the perfect host in a perfect world. The show would change, or it wouldn't survive. And if that meant fewer viral clips, fewer celebrity bromances, or even a smaller network deal, so be it. At that moment, something shifted. Not just in the room, but far beyond it. Because backstage, someone else had been watching the entire thing unfold. Bill Burr, still fuming, still pacing, had been standing just out of sight. And he heard every word. It wasn't clear what brought him back, whether it was respect, curiosity, or just unfinished business. But after a long pause, he stepped out, from the shadows, walked back onto the stage, and stood at the edge of the set. Fallon saw him. The audience turned, stunned again. No music played, no lights adjusted. It was raw and ugly and human. Burr didn't sit, didn't apologize, but he looked Fallon in the eye, arms crossed, and gave him a single nod. Not approval, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. Fallon stood, walked over, and, again breaking every convention, offered Burr the host's chair. It was more than symbolic. Fallon stepped away from the center, let the man who had detonated his entire persona take the lead for just one moment. And Bill? He didn't gloat, didn't spike the ball. He sat. And with the audience watching, holding their breath, Burr turned toward the crowd and said 5 words that would echo far beyond that night. Let's talk. About truth, then. What followed was not the sanitized comeback segment everyone expected. It was a conversation. No shouting, no branding. Just two men, one who had spent years building a platform of influence and one who never cared to have one, finally meeting. In the middle of honesty, they talked about the culture of fake outrage, about billionaires playing saviors, about the illusion of neutrality. Burr pushed, Fallon reflected. Fallon defended, Burr challenged. It was messy, uneven, but it was real. The segment never aired live, but clips hit the internet before the night was over. The entire showdown, the rant, the fallout, the confessions, the return, went viral within hours. Some called it the end of Fallon's career. Others called it the beginning of something new. And Fallon? He didn't say much about it afterward. But the next week, when the show returned, the format was different. No scripted monologue, no forced celebrity games, just conversations, honest ones. Some funny, some painful, but every one of them unscripted. Burr never came back. He didn't need to. His point had been made. And somewhere out there, Elon Musk likely fired off a cryptic tweet in response, but no one really cared. Because what mattered, what really mattered, was that for one night, late-night television remembered what it was supposed to be, not comfortable, not polished, but true. And in a world addicted to pretending, that was revolutionary. The lights dimmed. The camera faded out. The audience stood, not because they were told, but because something real had just happened. The host had been humbled. The guest had spoken his truth. And for once, everyone had listened.